Good evening, Grace Baptist Church. Welcome to our snow day. Good thing I'm preaching on trusting the Lord tonight because I got to put some trust in Him right now. I'm preaching to an iPhone instead of to people. It's a little weird for me, so we'll get through it though with God's grace. So our text tonight is Deuteronomy chapter 28. It's quite a long chapter, but it's very interesting and it's got lots of truth in it that we need to know. So, and it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of the body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kin, and the flocks of thy sheep. Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessing upon thee in the storehouses, and all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. The Lord shall establish thee an holy people unto himself, as he has sworn unto thee, if thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, and walk in his ways. And all people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of thee. And the Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, in the fruit of thy body, in the fruit of thy cattle, and in the fruit of thy ground, in the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open unto thee his good treasure, the heaven, to give the rain unto thy land in his season, and to bless all the work of thine hand. And thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day, to observe and to do them. And thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee this day, to the right hand or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Cursed shalt be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be thy fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, to thy increase of thy kin, and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, and all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of thy wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with the sword, and with the blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and thy earth that is under thy feet shall be iron. And the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust, and heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch whereof thou canst not be healed. The Lord shall smite thee with madness, and blindness, and astonishment of heart, and thou shalt group at noonday, as though blind groupeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in the ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her, and thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and thou shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed away. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that can not be healed, from the sole of thy foot unto the top of thy head. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all the coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine olive shall cast his fruit. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. All thy trees and fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all the curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commandeth thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever, because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he hath destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth. A nation whose tongue shalt not understand. A nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor shew favor to the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kin, or flocks, or thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustedest thou throughout all thy land, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, and the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee in the siege, and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave, so that he shall not give any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege. And in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates, the tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter, and toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for want of all things, secretly in the siege and the straitness wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear the glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed even great plagues, and of long countenance and sore sickness, and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the disease of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of the law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven, for the multitude, because thou wouldest not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shalt have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were even, and at even thou shalt say, would God it were morning. For the fear of thine heart, wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. And the Lord shall bring thee unto Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondswomen, and no man shall buy you. So Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means the second telling of the law, or the second law, or the second telling of the law, to be more accurate. It's not a second law. Moses does expound on the law quite a bit, but it's not a different law than the first law. It's just a second telling of the law. So Deuteronomy takes place, the book covers the years 1450 to 1400 BC. At this time, Moses is about 120 years old. Moses and the Israelites have been wandering the desert for 40 years. So at this point, God is about to usher the Israelites into the promised land of Canaan. They have arrived at the east bank of the Jordan River in Moab. This is where Moses addresses the people as they are about to cross the Jordan and realize God's promise. So in Deuteronomy, Moses is addressing the second generation of Israelites after the Exodus from Egypt. Remember back to the first time God told Israel to take the promised land. They disobeyed God out of fear. They sent spies into the land and decided that God wasn't strong enough or wasn't righteous enough to keep his promise of defeating the people who possessed the land already. As punishment, God told them that no one from that generation would live to see Israel take the land except Joshua, Caleb, and Moses. And only Caleb and Joshua would actually be among those that take the land. So one thing that I found in Deuteronomy is Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 39. It was very strange to me. I've always wondered at what point a person becomes responsible for their own salvation. As far as children, people with limited mental capacities and things like that. But in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 39, it says, moreover, your little ones, which ye said should be prey, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge between good and evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. And something stuck out to me there. He says that they had no knowledge of good and evil at that point in their lives. So I thought back to the fall of man and how that came about. And it was all because they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So to me, that seems like that is the point when we are responsible for our salvation. The point when we know the difference between good and evil, and that's when we need to accept Jesus and for our salvation. So that brings us to another point about infant baptism, and that just, if they don't know the difference between good and evil, then they don't need to be baptized. And we also know that because Jesus wasn't baptized as a baby. So that verse really spoke out to me, and when I was preparing it, and I just thought I'd share that with you. That's not the sermon. The sermon is actually going to be on trust, obedience, and blessings. But we'll get there. So Deuteronomy is, like I said, the second coming. And it brings us, and the theme of Deuteronomy, in my opinion, and my belief, is that it is about obedience. Chapters 4 through 26, Moses lays out the stipulations for success or failure once the Israelites have gone into the promised land. And there is really only one stipulation, even though Moses lays out many rules and laws in the next 22 chapters, and that stipulation is obedience. If they obey the commandments of God, they go into the promised land. They stay in the promised land, and if they don't, then they will be cursed, and they will be kicked out of the promised land, and they will have all kinds of troubles. So why is it important for Moses to retell the whole history of Israel and retell the laws and expound on them and warn the Israelites about the future? So in chapters, like I said, chapters 4 through 26, Moses is reminding the people of all the nation's failures. He uses these failures as a tool to steer the Israelites towards obedience. Sometimes we, as humans, need to be reminded of our failures. Me especially, I'm reminding all the time. Reminding myself, other people remind me, and it does good. It might hurt at the time, but it does good to remember what we have done wrong so we can keep from doing that again. He also warns them to stay clear of superstitions, false gods, and other practices of the nations that are around them, that they're about to conquer, and the ones who are the people in the land, they're worshiping all kinds of other gods, all kind of graven images, and all kind of other deities or people they see as deities that they sacrifice to, and God and Moses is warning them to stay away from those people. That's why in Deuteronomy, actually in Numbers and Leviticus and Exodus even, they talk about killing off entire people groups, and that's because God knew the Israelites, and he knew that they were bound to lean towards the worldly things and to give in to other people's beliefs. So he wanted to eradicate those people so the Israelites would stay away from their gods. So the Israelites were promised a land of about 300,000 square miles. At the height of their nation, they occupied 30,000 square miles of that. That's 1/10 of what God had promised them. And we know that at some point they will occupy all of it. They don't right now. They have a very small portion of land right now. But the Israelites had a continuous readiness to turn away and disobey God, and it made it impossible to realize the full blessing of God's promise. Chapter 28 lays out the blessings that come with obedience and the curses that come with disobedience. And perhaps not so ironically, the section that details with curses, verses 15 through 68, is substantially longer than the section that deals with blessings. And I think that's because God understood us as humans. I know that he understands us as humans, and that he wanted to make sure that the curses were laid out more than the blessings. And not only that, but God doesn't owe us blessings. He doesn't owe us anything. We owe him everything. So like I said, Deuteronomy is about obedience. Deuteronomy 28 is God, through Moses, telling the Israelites what will happen if they obey and what will happen if they don't obey. So obedience is dependent on trust. Sure, we can obey out of fear. I'm sure we've all been scared of our parents, but at some point that obedience is a reluctant obedience. And that's not what God wants from us. God wants and expects a willing obedience from us. Willing obedience only comes from a place of trust. And I'm reminded of the song, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know, thus saith the Lord. And it is sweet to trust in Jesus and trust in God. And trusting God is more about knowing who God is than knowing what he will do and why he's doing the things he's doing. If we trust who God is and that he is righteous, then we don't need to know what he's doing. We already know that it's going to be the right thing. When I think of trust and obedience, I'm reminded of Abraham taking Isaac at God's command to sacrifice him. Abraham trusted God, and because of his trust, he didn't hesitate to obey. Abraham didn't have a perfect track record for obeying and trusting God. As a matter of fact, he had a son because he didn't obey and trust God before Isaac. Abraham had to learn to trust God, and we have to learn to trust God also. And as he learned to trust God, and as we learn to trust God, become more obedient to him. And as we become more obedient, we receive more opportunities to be obedient. Speaking of that, Pastor Tally and I, a couple weeks ago, were talking, and when I decided to take this sermon on, and he paraphrased something he had heard before about obedience and disobedience. If falling deeper into sin was the only consequence of sin, that should be enough to drive us towards obedience. Likewise, if being obedient was the only reward for obedience, then that should be enough of a reward for us. After he said that, I looked back on my life, especially my younger years, and I was wholeheartedly against God most of my teenage life and even up to my late 20s. Not knowingly wholeheartedly against him, I just was living for the world. I remember how miserable I was. I didn't know it then, how miserable I was, but now looking back, I can see it. How every sin seemed to make me more miserable. Yes, sin appeased my worldly desires for a moment, for a short period of time, but I was never satisfied. The misery soon returned. Yet I continued to dive deeper into sin and deeper into sin until sin no longer satisfied me at all. And that is when I went looking for something else. That is when God pulled me out of the hole of my sinfulness and I had created. I was cursed at that point in my life. My first act of obedience was accepting Jesus as my Savior and confessing to him that I am a sinner in desperate need of God's grace. Now, as I grow in obedience, I find that satisfaction that I was looking for. I find that I no longer have to chase this world. I find that in him, in God, all my needs are met in abundance. I find that in him, I am blessed. Yeah, I have to agree with Pastor. Obedience is its own reward, its own blessing. So when we trust and obey God, blessings certainly follow that obedience and that trust. Spiritual blessings, definitely. Material blessings, possibly. Obedience to God's commands carries inherent rewards of blessings, just like disobedience or sin carries inherent consequences or curses. So if we're living in sin, we're a thief. At some point, we're going to get caught, and the consequences of that is going to be jail time or prison time or whatever. And that is an inherent consequence. Just like if we obey God, our lives are going to be better. It's going to be easier to live, and that's an inherent blessing of obedience to God. And many times these blessings that we see, or even these curses that we see, are just a change in perspective. It's just God changing our hearts so that we see things differently. I know this for a fact in my own life. I can look back at my wife. She didn't always seem like a blessing to me. My kids didn't always seem like a blessing to me. My jobs haven't always seemed like blessings to me. But now that I am obeying and trusting in the Lord, that I know that these things were blessings and are blessings. So things that we haven't always seen as blessings are now blessings to us. Other times, these are gifts from God, given as a reward to us, not a reward that we've earned. So these rewards come from God, not something that we can earn by doing better. These rewards or blessings are because of the goodness of God and not because of our greatness. So I would like to share a few blessings in my life that I have received or perhaps perceived since I began trusting and obeying God. First off, my children's heart for God. And that is one of the greatest blessings that I have ever experienced. So it was a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks ago. I'm sitting in my recliner, total quiet in the house. My wife is out doing something. I think she went to the store or something. My son was sitting at the computer, and it was peaceful. It was quiet. I was praying. I was asking the Holy Spirit to lead me on what to be said about blessings in connection with obedience. And I was struggling. I was struggling with it, and I still am struggling with it. Actually, that's why I went from obedience and blessings to trust and obedience, because I think I'm not real sure how obedience and blessings actually completely tie together. But I was praying and asking the Holy Spirit to lead me on what you need to hear and what I need to hear when it comes to blessings and obedience. And suddenly I hear a Bluetooth speaker hook up to Caden's phone, and the first song that comes blaring out of that is The Blessing. My first instinct was to get a little angry and tell him to turn it down, because I'm trying to study, I'm trying to read the Bible, I'm trying to write this sermon. But then it hits me that song, that Christian music station playing on Spotify or Pandora or whatever it was on, the sweet sound of that young boy, that child's voice singing praises to God, that is a blessing to me because of my obedience, because of my trust in God. If I didn't trust in God, if I wasn't being obedient to Him, He wouldn't know that station even exists, more than likely. My obedience to His command to raise my children up in the way they should go. My obedience to answer His call to preach His word. Let's just say the computer screen got a little harder to read through watery eyes after that. I promise it was allergies. So the next blessing I want to talk about is my marriage. My beautiful wife, she's an amazing, amazing person. There's no one that I know more loyal, no one more grace-filled, and no one on this earth more of a blessing in my life than her. We've been married going on 14 years, have been a couple for nearly 19 years, and trust me when I say I'm not an easy person to live with. Sometimes I have trouble living with myself, seriously. It's difficult sometimes. Our marriage is by no means perfect. We're both sinners, and without God, this marriage would be nothing. We've had some major struggles in our relationship, nearly all of which were caused by disobedience to God. God gave her to me before my salvation, but as I progress in my obedience, this marriage just gets better and better. At no time in our relationship has it been any more blessed than it is today, and I have no doubt that each day it is going to be more blessed and more blessed as long as we both remain obedient and trusting in God. I can undoubtedly attribute this to becoming more obedient to God's command, to love each other like Christ loved the church. And like I said, we don't always get it right. She gets it right more often than I do, especially the loving part. But we are in a much better place because of God's love. And the third blessing is what I'm doing right now, preaching God's word. So as many of you have noticed, I've been up here speaking quite often. Pastor Talley has been gracious enough to give up some of his blessing of blessing this congregation with his calling to preach so that I can obey God's call to me to do the same. I am 100% convinced that God has given this call to me because of my desire and drive to be obedient to Him in my recent past. So like I was telling you earlier about obedience leading to more obedience, because of my obedience in answering the call to preach, I've become more obedient in studying the Bible, reading the Bible, and praying. All of these things are a blessing in itself. And as I learn more about who God is and who I am in Christ, even more so is the fact that I get to bless others with the Word of God as I learn more of His Word. I get to apply what I've learned to my life, and in turn, even more blessed by that. It's a cycle. Obedience begets obedience, begets obedience. So the more obedient we are, the more trusting we are, the more opportunities for obedience So sometimes when we're obeying God, our lives may not seem blessed. Job, for example, would be my first example. I'm sure, looking from the inside out or the outside in on Job's situation, people were wondering how could he still feel blessed and still trust in God after all he'd been through, after all that God had let him endure. So we may have pain and sorrow, we may have financial troubles, we may be sick, we may lose loved ones. These times in our lives don't sound like blessings. However, if we're truly trusting in God and trusting his word, trusting who he is, then we should be able to see blessings in any situation. Jeremiah 29:11 tells us that God has a plan to prosper us and not do us harm. So if we trust him truly, 100% trust him, then we will see that all situations are for our good. Romans 8:28 makes that clear. So if Abraham had chosen to hesitate or doubt and question God when he told him to take Isaac up to that mountain and sacrifice him, his only son, he would not have had the opportunity to see him provide in a miraculous way. And it's the same thing with us. If we don't trust him in the hard times, we can't see him doing miraculous things. Abraham would have missed the opportunity to enter into an even deeper intimacy with his heavenly Father. But God knew. He knew what he was asking Abraham to do. He was asking him to choose to trust him. And even without knowing, so it comes to this: we will trust God or not. Because when we trust him, we obey him. And when we obey him, we get to know him, which is the greatest blessing there is. If the Israelites had trusted him enough to obey him, they would have not wandered through the wilderness for 40 years. If they would have trusted him and obeyed him, the first generation would have been in the promised land, and we wouldn't have needed the second generation to hear Deuteronomy. They would have received all the blessings God had promised them. My first and most important, most amazing blessing came when I trusted Jesus as my Savior, when I obeyed the command to put my faith in him. My first blessing was salvation. Again, it was already there. Jesus had died for me 2,000 years earlier, but my perception had changed by the grace of God. So I'm asking you today to trust and obey and see how God works in your life. Heavenly Father, I ask that you would open the hearts of the people to the words I've spoken today, Lord, that you would lead them into more obedience, into more trust, that through your grace, through your omnipotence, you would show us where you want us to go, and that you would soften our hearts, and that we would lean on you and trust you in every situation. I ask that you just lift everyone up that's hearing this message, Lord, and that you would bless them. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen.